Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Pigskin Pete. Happy quarantine to everybody. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to cook any steak. These happen to be New York strip steaks with 3 ingredients: butter, pepper, and salt. Now, this salt I use is a kosher salt. It has to be a coarse salt. Don't use table salt. There's a bunch of other fancy things you can do here, but the point of this is to show you how to make a great steak with absolutely nothing, only 3 ingredients. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to season both steaks with both the kosher salt and black pepper. You can add some garlic powder to it if you want. I wouldn't go too crazy with that. But the whole point of this, like I said before, is to use the least amount of ingredients possible. So we're going to season both sides with both the salt and the pepper. The butter will come in later. The other point of this video is to show you how to do this without a grill. This will all be done in the kitchen, and it will all be done in around 10 minutes. That includes the seasoning, and that includes the cooking time. The only thing is I did take the steaks out of the refrigerator about 30 minutes prior to doing this, because you want the steaks to be completely or as close as possible to room temperature before you start cooking them. Now the skillet over here on the right has been sitting over medium-high heat for the past few minutes. That's very important. Before you sear the steaks, you want to make sure that the skillet that you're using is extremely hot before the sear. You're only going to sear each side for a couple of minutes, so you want to make sure it's nice and hot. You can use olive oil, which is probably preferred, which will kind of fry and create a harder crust on the outside of the steak. But again, the point of this video is to try to do what I'm trying to do with the least amount of ingredients. So I'm excluding the olive oil, I'm excluding the garlic pepper, and some of the other herbs that you can use. So anyways, you just want to make sure it's good and hot. Put the steaks on the skillet at medium-high heat and set the timer for 2 minutes. And you'll want to press down on the steaks there to make sure they make good contact with the skillet. My only advice here is don't be flipping the steaks back and forth, back and forth. Just leave them on one side, depending on the thickness of the steak. Now, for these steaks are about 1 inch thick. So 2 minutes. If they're 3 inches thick, maybe 3 minutes. Anywhere between 2 and 3 minutes, no matter how big the steak is. But don't be flipping them back and forth. Just leave them on one side for 2 minutes. Let the timer go off. Then flip them over to the other side and cook the other side for 2 to 3 minutes, depending on how thick the steak is. Now, I did lie to you. I said I only used 3 ingredients: salt, pepper, and butter. But we always use beer as an ingredient in this house when I'm cooking. I don't use the beer to cook steaks. I just use it because it tastes good. All right, so the 2 minutes is up. Now we're going to flip the steaks over, and you'll see, because of this crazy pan I'm using, I have fake grill marks. This is how to cook a steak in 10 minutes or so, seasoning and cooking and searing, and fooling either your wife, your friends, or maybe possibly your first date into thinking that you slaved over the grill. So that's the reason I use this crazy pan. Puts crazy grill marks on anything, including grilled cheese sandwiches, if that's your thing. Do not neglect your beer during the cooking. Your beer has feelings too. All right, so now that the searing is done, I've done 2 minutes, maybe 2.5 minutes max on each side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove one of the steaks from the pan and set it to the side. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the other steak, and on the New York strip steak, there's an outer layer of fat on one side. And I'm going to sear that layer of fat. Now, if you don't like the fat and you're going to cut the fat off anyways, probably no reason to do that. So I'm doing this to my steak because my wife's probably going to cut her fat off of her steak, but I enjoy the taste of the fat. So I'm going to take 30, 45 seconds here and sear the fat on the side of this New York strip. Now, this depends on the cut you get. Ribeye has the same thing. If you get a filet mignon, you're probably not going to have this unless you want to sear the entire outside of it. But especially on a New York strip or a ribeye, you want to make sure you sear the fat to a golden brown. Now we add the butter, and you get to see me look like a complete and total tard trying to hold the phone with one hand and smear butter over the top of a steak with a giant knife that's not meant for spreading. But that doesn't matter. The point is, get some butter on that steak before we stick it in the oven. And I can already hear the comments in the comment section. Look at this guy's dirty pan he's cooking those steaks on. That's not dirty, son. That's called character. If you don't have that black stuff all over your cooking sheets, you're not doing it right, son. All right, so now it is time to finish off these steaks in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit on the middle oven rack. Now, it's about 6 minutes per inch of thickness. So these steaks right here are about an inch thick. So we will cook them for about 6 minutes at 400 degrees. If you have an 1.5 inch thick steak, maybe about 8 to 9 minutes, so on and so forth. 3-inch steak, if you get a big thick filet mignon, about 15 to 18 minutes. And that's going to give it a good pink center, about medium rare, which is how I like it. If you want it a little more well done, you're going to ruin it if you do that. But if you like it a little bit more well done, cook it for a minute or two longer. If you like it a little bit more rare, a minute or two less. Now, the most important thing is when you're finished cooking these steaks, do not cut into them. Let them rest for at least 10 minutes. They'll continue to cook even though they're, not in the oven for at least 10 more minutes or so. And what you'll be left with, if you do it correctly, is a nice, juicy, tender New York strip or whatever you want to cook steak.